Okay, hi folks. We are looking at our last topic in the syllabus under section 11, which looks at economic problems and solutions. And we're also going to tie in foreign direct investment, which also is very much related to what we're going to be discussing under this topic. All right, so an economic problem, or if we look at economic problems within our Caribbean region, we see that there are a number of common economic problems faced by countries in the Caribbean. And these problems basically impact human development, standard of living, and can lead to a whole set of other issues which we're going to look at. Right? So, from an economic standpoint, it is very important that government, which is the main manager of the country's economy, right? That they pay attention to these economic problems. We've looked at economic institutions in our last lesson, and basically they have we've seen how they have crafted their objective and their purpose in terms of helping to alleviate some of these same problems that we're going to discuss. Alright, so pay particular attention to the problems, and then we're also going to look at what are solutions that government can take as a country or as a region in the case of where we have common markets integrating to help solve these problems together. What can be done to help resolve these problems? All right, so our first problem, which we find common in the Caribbean, and because we're looking at Caribbean perspective, I'm going to keep referring to the Caribbean, right? And not necessarily global economic problems. So we're looking at Caribbean economic problems that are shared among Caribbean countries. So unemployment is a major economic problem faced within various Caribbean countries. Of course, because countries are of different status. For instance, some of the Caribbean countries, we've said that some are more developed, right? And then there are some that are given status of developing and lower developing countries or lower developed countries, right? So based on the economic status of these countries, you may see different rates as it applies to unemployment. So we're going to look at it from the case in point of Grenada, our country, and how it relates. So unemployment is a situation where persons are available and they're willing to work, but they cannot find a job. Right? So we've seen that high levels of unemployment can lead to issues such as poverty. Because if you're not working, then you're not earning an income, which means you're not able to afford the basic goods and services. And what this also does is lead to lower standard of living, right? And as we already defined, standard of living looks at your ability to access certain goods and services. So if you're not employed, your standard of living will be low. You may definitely find yourself within the poverty group, and this creates a lot of social issues, you know, connected to these two main problems here. So unemployment is a main issue that we find within the Caribbean. Now, globalization has been one factor that has contributed a lot to unemployment. And what do we mean by that? Now, we have the case where countries produce locally, domestically, and they satisfy their own local needs. But then we see as trade becomes more free, meaning less barriers, countries are open to more regional and global trade, where they engage in international trade. This therefore opened the door for more companies to be erected in different countries, or more products to come into different countries through trading. And that means these local industries now have to compete, right? So in light of that, sometimes we see that the local industries suffer because of globalization and because of bigger companies coming into um, the Caribbean countries, and that may cause loss of jobs. Again, we have the issue of lack of adequate skills. If persons are not properly educated and skilled, they will not be able to meet the requirements of the industries as it relates to labor needs. So it is very important that skills and education be given priority, because this can contribute to the problem of unemployment. So, in the case of Grenada, we see here some examples of the unemployment rate as recorded within the statistics. So, from 2013 to 2019, we've seen some drastic decrease in the unemployment rate. And as we look at the solutions, we can see how in Grenada's situation that has helped to reduce the rate of unemployment. So in 2013, we had unemployment rate of 40% thereabouts, and in 2019, the rate has dropped drastically to 15.2%. Right, so obviously, government has invested heavily in solutions that can help to alleviate um, or at least to reduce this unemployment rate. So there are different types of unemployment. So we have cyclical. Now, cyclical is unemployment that is based on the changes that occur in the trading cycle. So businesses go through a cycle, right? Basically, there are times when demand is high, demand is low, and we know that demand and supply and pricing do have a relation. So sometimes we see the economy going through periods of recession, where there's high inflation, supply may not be adequate to meet demand, um, and then it creates issues for businesses where they cannot survive, and they start cutting costs. And one of the first costs that we often find businesses trying to cut is labor, right? And we see in our news outlet this week one of the trade unions speaking of a major supermarket on the island, um, due to the COVID effect and the loss of customer base and the need to restructure labor and to reduce their costs. So we see there that some persons, though the organization did not necessarily um, release any worker, but there were some changes. And that goes to tell you that it is possible that due to these recession periods triggered by many events in an economy, possibly you can have unemployment. So we call this cyclical unemployment, where the changes in the trading cycle triggers businesses to reduce their labor. And then we have seasonal unemployment. So seasonal unemployment basically looks at unemployment due to seasonal changes, right? So the nature of activity is not consistent, right, throughout a period, meaning like the entire year. So, for instance, tourism or agriculture, right? We know that these are sectors that have a season, right, based on what you're putting forward as your product or your service. So, in light of that, there are persons who may be hired, for instance, for the tourist season, as we call it, which may be heightened between, the December to April period. But then after that point, um, you know, the unemployment rate increases for that sector because that activity, right, or that sector is not as a high for other months of the year, right? So persons can become unemployed due to the change of seasonal activities. Then we have structural unemployment. So again, within an economy, you'll find that businesses make changes based on how the economy goes. And sometimes we find workers, because of the changes an organization they make, they may not have the necessary skills to remain. And we see a case in point where businesses upgrade technology, and what that does, it replaces humans. So a lot of labor is displaced, or workers are displaced from their jobs because their skills are no longer required because of mechanization and automation, playing in there. Then we have frictional unemployment. This is due to persons changing jobs. So sometimes you may be looking for a better job, you're trying to find a new job, and the period between that change could leave you unemployed. Right? So we call that frictional unemployment. Then we have classical or real wage unemployment. Now this one is triggered by a high wage rate. So if let's say due to union activities, the union would have gotten the business or the sector to increase on the wage rate. So they're now paying a higher wage rate to employees. Now this could cause the employer to suffer from very high labor costs, and in an effort to cut costs, they may reduce the number of workers that they have. So this can actually lead to unemployment, and we call this classical unemployment. Then we have voluntary unemployment. Basically, there are persons who choose not to work, so they are probably seeking a job, but because they're not getting the job that they want, they choose not to work. Or maybe because the unemployment benefits are higher, right? Compared to maybe the job that they'll get, they choose not to work, right? So we call that voluntary unemployment. Then we have casual unemployment. This is where persons only work occasionally. So they basically do odd jobs. For instance, we have persons doing the bushing work for government, or something that comes up, maybe let's say in construction or agriculture. So they do odd jobs, right, just to get by, but they're not consistently employed or permanently employed within an organization. Then we have residual employment. This occurs when persons work to achieve a particular goal, and after that, they stop. Or it could also be a case where someone has a disability and that prevents them from working, so they're no longer able to work, right? And then we have underemployment, and basically, this is a very common one where you find, you know, in many Caribbean countries, you find where persons are employed but not in their full capacity. So they may have, let's say, a degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, but they're actually working at a level that is beneath that qualification. So the skill level that is required, right, may not match the qualifications that they have. All right, so what are some solutions to unemployment? Of course, entrepreneurship is one of the initiatives that government can try to stimulate within the economy. So try to get persons to start their own business. And we see government do have training sessions or workshops through the different agencies where they can help persons to become their own bosses or to start their own businesses. So that is one factor. And by creating employment, you are actually becoming employed, and then you may hire workers, so you are actually contributing to reducing the employment rate. Then we have early retirement plans. So if the retirement age range or the retirement age is restricted, then it means that you're creating openings whereby persons who are retired in a given period now make way for persons who are entering the job market or the labor supply. Right, so that is also another strategy. Training and development is also important because, as we said earlier, if persons don't have the skills or the training, they're not developed to complete the task, then they're not going to be hired. So, again, we see initiatives being taken here in terms of developing and training workers. Control the birth rate. So if countries have an extremely high birth rate, it means that we will always have a very large, um, population in terms of the younger age groups, right? That is part, of course, they are part of the working labor supply at some point after school living. Right, so that is also another factor that can be controlled so that you don't have this great imbalance when it comes to the population structure. Create new industries. Again, by industrialization, you can allow persons to become unemployed. So industries relates to creating different avenues for production, right? Whatever sector it is or branch of trade. And once these are developed, then you are creating an avenue for that factor of production which is needed by these industries to produce, which is labor. The sectors that are already existing, like agriculture, etc., you need to also expand on these. And um, any other sector that is there to assist in reducing unemployment, that can also be a good way to help. For instance, tax relief and subsidies. So if businesses get tax relief where they get some level of concession to help them reduce their costs, or subsidies to help them bear the cost of production, that can allow them to expand the business, maintain the labor, and probably add more labor instead of reducing labor, and that would allow the unemployment rate to be reduced also. Processing local materials instead of exporting them in the raw state. So this is typical again in Grenada. We have some natural resources or you know extracted materials like the our cocoa and nutmeg industry. Many of it is exported in its raw state, right? Instead of being used here and processed into something else. So if we create industries that will process our own raw materials, then we are also creating jobs for these industries or factories will need workers to produce. Regional cooperation, we see CSME playing a big role here again. Free movement of labor, right? So maybe you may not be able to get a job in your country, but because of CSME, with free movement of labor, you can go to another country and secure a job. Set up employment offices. This, of course, will allow persons to get necessary information and even information about job offers available, training available, and any other information that can help persons to become more employable, right? Hence, to reduce the employment rate. And lastly, an unemployment levy. Now, in some countries, I'm not sure if it's popular in the Caribbean, probably not. But in some countries, you do have a tax um, for businesses. You might have some criteria to it as to who is eligible, but it's an unemployment tax paid by businesses. And basically, what government do with this revenue is they would pump it back into the initiatives that will help to reduce employment. So they would use it for training workers, for development programs, and any sort of infrastructure that is necessary to help um, create more jobs and reduce the employment rates. All right, so our second problem common in the Caribbean is population density. So we do have a few mentioned countries that have very high population density: Barbados, Bermuda, St. Martin, Aruba. Population density basically looks at average amount of people living in a given unit area of land, right? And it's measured by total population divided by area, or the area square kilometers, right? So based on the density um, calculation, you would know whether or not it has a high density or low density, right? So some countries, because the land space is not as great, it creates a high population density because there are too many people in the country compared to the land available for living. Right? Large populations, of course, is very or creates a lot of pressure on government, because you're looking here now at finding the resources, which is already scarce. And remember, one of the main issues of managing an economy is using the scarce resources that you have, right? So if you have a large population, basically you have to deal with the pressure of being able to use these scarce resources to ensure that everyone has, or welfare is taken care of. So utilities will be stretched, healthcare and education will be stretched, right? Because you have more people now depending on these resources. And you often find also in large populations high levels of crime, pollution, traffic congestion. Right, so these are some of the issues that are connected to high population density. Now, Grenada is not noted to have a high population density. Right, so basically we're in the range of 112,000. Um, that figure, of course, will change. So we do have growth rates, and our growth rate is in the 0.49, so under 1%, in the last you know century or so. Um, but it did record a 2.34% growth rate within the period 1918 to 1985, right? So that was a big jump there. But other years, when I looked at the statistics, pretty much in that range, under 0.5%. Our population density is presently at 329 per kilometer square. Right, so not a very high density rate. All right, so what are some solutions to population density problems? So, of course, we know that population density looks at size of population as to the area. So maybe you need to look at your migration policies, right? And what measures you can put in place to help restrict or you know make it more freer for persons to move, right? um, then you have long-term goal of restricting the rate of national increase of the population, of course, to family planning policies, more educational policies, so as to help prevent the rapid increase of the population, right? Especially for countries where you have high population density. All right, so a third common problem in the Caribbean is migration. So Grenada's migration rate is recorded at 599 people yearly, and that includes immigration and emigration. Um, so that is taken into consideration. Of course, migration, as we said before, is relatively permanent movement of people from one place to the other, right? So you're basically looking at internal migration from rural areas to urban areas, which creates a lot of issues within the city, and leaves the rural areas, lacking for development. And then you have external migration where persons leave their country and go to other countries, whether it be for better job, education, um, ties with family, or fleeing from political unrest, etc. Right? So one of the main issues, as we also discussed in a previous topic, is brain drain, because if people are leaving their country through what we call emigration, then that creates a situation of brain drain, and we're talking about skilled, educated persons. So the country's economy will also feel the impact because we need the skill labor, right? Remember, we said there are four factors of production, and labor is one of it. Skilled labor is necessary to help develop and grow that economy. So, what are some solutions to migration? Obviously, people, if skilled persons are leaving, then you need to ensure that jobs are available. You need to ensure that you develop your human resources, and you need to ensure that you develop your sectors so that um, there are proper infrastructure in place for persons to seek the development that they need instead of leaving their country. And then, in terms of creating more jobs, you need to ensure that you invest in the creation of local industries or to stimulate the growth of local industries, but also, especially in a Caribbean situation, we need to also help increase more access to foreign direct investment, where you're going to be bringing in or allowing foreign investors to come into the country and create industries, which will therefore create more jobs. Right, our next common problem in the Caribbean is debt. Right, so many Caribbean countries have a very high debt rate. Right, so the high debt to GDP ratio. Now, this ratio looks at the amount of national debt of a country as a percentage of its GDP. All right, so high debt to GDP is not good for an economy. It stifles the economy because instead of being able to use your inflows, your income for investing in the economy and its growth and development, that has to be diverted to paying debt. Right. So Caribbean governments, yes, they're dependent on overseas debt, borrowing from various institutions like IMF, World Bank, and having to pay with interest. This actually slows down the growth of the economy because they have to focus more on repaying the debt. So Grenada's public debt has always been um, something that is, in the highlights. 2013, we've had 108% of GDP as a public debt, and we see that rate decreased over the years, right? But it's still some high figures as it relates. Now, of course, the less industrialized countries are, meaning the less production that is taking place internally, you tend to find that there's a more dependence on debt, right? To get um, foreign exchange or to get monies, funds, capital in order to produce. So that is one of the link there. Countries that are more industrialized and using the local resources to produce tend to be less dependent and have lower debt to GDP ratios. So, what are some solutions to the debt burden issue? Of course, we need to reduce our imports and increase more on our exports because exports generate income. So, that will cause us to be less dependent on getting income from external countries because we are creating our own avenue for generating income. Some countries also increase taxes, and that creates or allows them to have funds that can, meet their needs. Of course, taxes are restructured based on or structured based on the burden on the taxpayers. So that is a last resort. Foreign direct investment, as I said, where industries are created by foreign investors physically coming into the country um, from the global markets. That again opens up a lot of trading on the global market for businesses, and that brings in foreign exchange. So, what countries need to do is target solutions that will bring in inflows and investments instead of allowing you to, you know, send it externally, right? Like what importing does. All right, so what are some solutions to population density problems? So, of course, we know that population density looks at size of population as to the area. So, maybe you need to look at your migration policies, right? And what measures you can put in place to help restrict or, you know, make it more freer for persons to move, right? Um, then you have long-term goal of restricting the rate of national increase of the population, of course, to family planning policies, more educational policies, so as to help prevent the rapid increase of the population, right? Especially for countries where you have high population density. And raw materials. Again, foreign direct investment is one of the strategies that have been used in terms of obtaining capital for development of these economies. So you can sell your shares and securities to foreigners, or you can sell your business, allow them to make physical investment in your country, and that is a way to get access. um, of course, if you want raw materials to be easily accessible, you need to put certain infrastructures in place. So, distribution and technology related infrastructure need to be properly developed. Your ports, your airports, road networks, telecommunication, these are very important to allow easy access because now we see a lot of countries are trading internationally, and because of these network setup, it becomes very easy to do so. Now, we also have a lot of local resources in the Caribbean region that are not fully utilized. So, maybe we need to first tap into what we have and use it to produce instead of exporting it in its raw form. And that can allow us to have access to these. And by creating and even by exporting, we create foreign exchange, and that becomes a source of capital for further investments. All right, so a third common problem in the Caribbean is migration. So Grenada's migration rate is recorded at 599 people yearly, and that includes immigration and emigration. Um, so that is taken into consideration. Of course, migration, as we said before, is relatively permanent movement of people from one place to the other, right? So you're basically looking at internal migration from rural areas to urban areas, which creates a lot of issues within the city, and leaves the rural areas, lacking for development. And then you have external migration where persons leave their country and go to other countries, whether it be for better job, education, um, ties with family, or fleeing from political unrest, etc. Right? So one of the main issues, as we also discussed in a previous topic, is brain drain. Because if people are leaving their country through what we call emigration, then that creates a situation of brain drain, and we're talking about skilled, educated persons. So the country's economy will also feel the impact because we need the skill labor, right? Remember we said there are four factors of production, and labor is one of it. Skilled labor is necessary to help develop and grow that economy. So how can we resolve this? Some of the same solutions come up again. So foreign direct investment can help. They can pump capital, equipment, etc. into those industries. We see in Grenada, for instance, China contributing equipment, machinery, and other resources, and even their technology in terms of how things are grown, new plants, etc., that can help develop the agriculture sector. So that can actually help that traditional sector to benefit more from the foreign direct investment. Of course, we need to better utilize our local resources, you know, try to get more foreign exchange coming in from exporting, and that could trigger those sectors to grow also. Training for workers, invest in technology in those sectors, um, you know, and make it more attractive so that persons would actually want to get trained and skilled and educated because they see that the wages are also attractive, right? So what are some solutions to the debt burden issue? Of course, we need to reduce our imports and increase more on our exports because exports generate income. So that will cause us to be less dependent on getting income from external countries because we are creating our own avenue for generating income. Some countries also increase taxes, and that creates or allows them to have funds that can meet their needs. Of course, taxes are restructured based on or structured based on the burden on the taxpayers. So that is a last resort. Foreign direct investment, as I said, where industries are created by foreign investors physically coming in into the country um, from the global markets. That again opens up a lot. Some of the solutions, of course, involve um, again we could mention the foreign direct investment that can help to grow industries because some of these investors actually invest in local industries or bring in new industries into the country, right? So by developing the infrastructure and also by ensuring that local investors um, play a role there because we cannot allow only foreign investment to make up our economy, right? Because there are disadvantages of multinationals being in a country, right? So we have to look at those factors. All right, so I keep mentioning foreign direct investment. Just to recap, it relates to capital investment in factories, machinery, and equipment. Basically, we're looking at physical investment. So when persons from other countries purchase factories, businesses, machines, other equipment, shares in companies, they are actually foreign investors, right? And they're making a foreign investment. And we see that very popular in Grenada lately, especially in the hotel industry, where foreign investors are coming in through our citizenship by investment program, and they are investing in physical businesses, right, that can actually help develop our economy. So this is some statistics on Grenada's foreign investment as a percentage of GDP, right? Just about 0.15 thereabout $1 billion in 2018, which makes up 12.96% of the GDP, right? So makes a good impact there. All right. So what are some benefits of FDI? We've said it, many of it as we discussed the issues. Jobs are created. We get more access to the global markets, and that can lead to more exporting. Technologies can be advanced because they come in with their technology and know-how. So the local industries benefit from that. Human skills can be developed. So they come in and they train workers. Um, you get capital, right? And that can help you to develop your infrastructure. And most importantly, the country's balance of payment is improved because that is an inflow which can help positively contribute to more surplus, right? So that extra income that the government makes is important for the balance of payment. Also, the taxation coming from these FDIs are also income that the government can also get. Now, there are some negatives, so countries have to look out for the local industries. They must be protected because the larger companies that come in can displace some of these local companies with their cheaper goods, and the fact that they enjoy economies of scale. They can provide goods at cheaper rates, right? Sometimes their quality is also better. So the smaller companies or businesses may lose sale because of that competition. So there must be protection for the local businesses. Of course, when these companies make investment, let's say they become shareholders and they buy majority shares, they become the main decision makers. So again, you're taking away decision making from the local investors, and the foreign investors now have more say in how the local economy or that industry is developed. Another problem we see is environmentally. So a lot of these factories and large firms actually contribute to pollution. They mismanage the resources of the country, and that can create some negative problems for us. We also want to try to avoid these companies becoming monopolies, right? Because as we know, monopolies leave economies with no choice when it comes to price and supply. So that has to be avoided. And the local culture can also be affected, right? And although they create jobs, most of the investment is in the physical capital rather than the wages. So you don't always find that the wages are high um, compared to something like the country that they originate from. So that is it for this topic. So as I said, this is our final topic. If you have any questions, feel free to send it to me. Please go to Google Classroom and complete all the quizzes, and we're going to continue our sessions, practice sessions, so that you can get yourself ready for exam.